Thanks for coming. I'll be talking about nudging and the relationship with rationality, or more specifically, the impact specific nudging techniques have on rationality. So we'll have to try and flesh out what rationality exactly means. But I'll start by giving you a definition of what nudging is, go into some of the contentious issues in the literature, give you some examples. I'm sure most of you will be familiar with most of them, but just to make sure we're on the same page. Then go into the relationship between nudging and rationality, make a number of distinctions that will then be able to, that will be useful when we analyze how nudging can have an influence on people's rationality. So, the definition. This is the one that has been used most often. It's from the best-selling book by Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein. They define a nudge as any aspect of the choice architecture that alters people's behavior in a predictable way without forbidding any options or significantly changing their economic incentives. So it's all about choice architecture, the way in which you frame decisions, the way in which you set up a choice context has a predictable impact on the choices and decisions that people make when they are in this choice architecture, when they are confronted with the choice architecture. The subtitle of the book is called Improving Decisions About Health, Wealth and Happiness. So the aim is to improve people's decisions rather than block or change them. And the whole idea is that this is a novel approach compared to the kind of like basic standard policy tools that most governments use, which is either try and tap into people's rational processes, try to give them information, persuade them, convince them, do a campaign, and try to inform them. Other kind of sets of policy tools that has been around for quite a while now is changing the incentives. You subsidize specific options, you make a law, you coerce people, and then fine them if they violate the rule. What's new about this? Maybe not that much, but the novelty kind of comes from the fact that it's a policy approach based on behavioral economics. And behavioral economics has been on the rise the last couple of decades. We have more and more insights into the workings of the human mind and how, together with this choice architecture, the specific psychological mechanisms generate specific behavioral results. Right? So nudges always are based on this kind of combination between an internal element, knowledge about psychological mechanisms, and an external element. We're not going to try and change the internal elements in a way. We're just going to take the human mind for what it is. But we are going to set up the choice architecture, the external element, in a way that combines, provides results and has predictable results in terms of behavior. There are some contentious issues in the literature that I just want to flag before going into the analysis. So there's a big question whether nudges, whether we need an additional element with respect to the goals of nudges, the directions into which nudges lead us, whether we need that as part of the definition. So some would say nudges are by definition paternalistic. They're by definition improving people's decisions, which means improving people's well-being one way or the other, conceived one way or the other. So it's making, enabling people to make better choices for themselves. Right? So there's a paternalist element in there, according to some. I just saw the talk with Adam Oliver over lunch. He seems to be suggesting that this paternalist element, he calls it related to internalities rather than externalities, is indeed a part of the definition of nudging.
Sorry, isn't there also a view, maybe it's of Sunstein and Taylor as well, that well-being has to be in terms of the agent's own value.
Judgment or something like that. Yeah, I'll come back to that later on. Yeah.
So there's also a non-paternalistic view there.
Yeah, what is kind of confusing is that Sunstein and Taylor, together with the concept nudge, they also launched this notion of libertarian paternalism. Then you get into questions, what is paternalism exactly? I think it has confused things more than it should have. But I'll go into the according to their own values kind of thing later on. I take a broad definition of nudges saying, no, whatever, predictably, implementing choice architecture that have a predictable impact on people's behavior in whatever direction can be considered a nudge. So we can nudge people to make them happier, to make them healthier, to help them achieve whatever goals they have. It's more in line with what Sunstein and Taylor would have. But also to decrease the chance they are harming others, so to avoid externalities, to make them more moral. In my view, even a company that nudges its customers in order to buy something that will maximize the profits of the company is a nudge. It's a change in the choice architecture that has a predictable behavioral impact. The other contentious issue has to do with means of the nudge. Shouldn't we add something here, saying something that nudges make use of psychological mechanisms studied by behavioral economists, psychologists, and so on. So they have to tap into people's heuristics, cognitive heuristics, motivational aspects, biases as well, and you have a whole list of relatively well-known psychological mechanisms: status quo bias, inertia, loss aversion, conformism, salience. So nudges are interventions, policy tools that tap into exactly these psychological mechanisms. And I would say yes, let's include that in the definition in order to distinguish nudging from informing, coercing, incentivizing, finding, and so on. So nudging is something different than merely informing and persuading people. From time to time, Sunstein takes a much broader approach. So he says, if you put a sign up, if there's a dangerous bridge ahead, and you just put a sign up saying, watch out, dangerous bridge ahead, or this bridge is unsafe, that's a change in the choice architecture which has a predictable impact on behavior, so it's a nudge. Right, but it's also merely informing people, so what is the difference then with purely rational strategies? So I take the approach that it needs to tap into these irrational psychological mechanisms, the one that I have already mentioned, status quo bias, salience, and so on. But it's good to know that, or it's good to keep in mind that a lot of interventions play into both our rational capacities and our less rational capacities, right? I mean, think of informing people in a specific way. If energy companies send out letters to their customers saying you have to pay their bill, the way in which you design the layout of the letter has a predictable impact on the amount of people who will actually pay their bill. Right? So if you put a due date, for example, on top, that increases the amount of people actually paying their bill. So if you put it somewhere below, it doesn't. Salience, which means that you highlight some options, you put them in bold, you use colors. That's tapping into people's irrational mechanisms. From a rational point of view, it shouldn't matter what the layout is of the letter or what color the amount is in or something like that. But from a psychological perspective and with respect to these kind of irrational mechanisms like salience, it does. A lot of nudges use both, right? I mean, they inform people, but use framing, facts, use salience in order to highlight specific options. Right? But it's hard to, it's always kind of like a combination of the two. When you talk about nudges, I always feel that I need to put up a disclaimer first. I'm saying that in general, I am quite sympathetic towards the idea of nudging. I don't consider it to be the solution to all our problems. I don't consider it to be kind of like a whole new approach to government that is going to solve all the problems that the previous approaches couldn't. I do think that there are some ethical problems raised by some specific techniques in some specific circumstances. And I also do not think it's necessarily incompatible with approaches that inform, persuade, and convince people, right? I mean, often, if convincing, informing, and persuading people helps and works and is effective, let's go for that, sure. I mean, I'm not in favor of this kind of nudge world, as Jeremy Walter puts it, where there's only nudging in place. What I do want to do is have a look at the arguments of critics. They often have this idea that it decreases autonomy, so it should be off the table. There is a concern there with respect to autonomy. There is a concern with respect to rationality. Let's look at it, let's take it seriously and see what it's about. It's also good to take into account that when we assess the desirability of nudges, we should also assess their effectiveness compared to alternatives. If you have a dangerous curve ahead, you can put a sign up. Or you can, for example, paint white lines on the road, which are, I should explain this, the distance between the lines decreases as you drive over them, so you get almost automatically, unconsciously, the impression that you speed up when you drive over the lines. This almost unconsciously triggers the behavior of braking. Right? That's a nudge. It's a change in choice architecture that taps into our less than rational mechanisms, which has a predictable behavior. Is this desirable or not? It all depends on how effective it is. If putting a sign up ensures that there's nobody dying in the dangerous curve up ahead, then that's fine with me. What evidence shows that in some cases it's not enough, and that the nudge, the lines on the road actually work much better. That's a huge argument in favor of this specific nudge proposal. So let's go through some examples just to make sure that we're on the same page. The cafeteria example is the most famous one. The things you put at eye level, for example, will be more likely to be picked by customers. So if you place apples at an eye level rather than donuts, you're going to increase overall apple consumption and decrease donut consumption. This is the lines on the road. It's an example in Chicago. The effect was phenomenal. I mean, the drop in deaths from car crashes further on in the dangerous road was remarkable. Cigarette warnings. There's different way of warning people about negative effects of smoking. You can put it in small print. You can put the big smoking kills on cigarette packs, or you can do it like this if you want to suggest that smoking or nicotine consumption decreases your potence, increases your impotence. This is a nice way of visualizing it. It's a salient way of giving out this information. Seatbelt warnings. Here too you can see it's both this annoying sound in the car that keeps on going off as long as you don't put in your seatbelt sign. As long as you don't put in your seatbelt. It's a piece of information, but the way in which it is presented is also tapping into less rational processes. Then there's examples like clocky, which is an annoying alarm clock as well. It starts running around the room as soon as it goes to so you have to get up and look under your bed or a closet. It's also meant to get you out of bed, and it does. A simpler idea is just to put your smartphone, for example, out of reach, right? So you actually have to get up in order to turn off the alarm. Okay, so what I want to do in the paper is to disentangle a number of claims that are being made with respect to the impact of nudges on rationality. There's a bunch of things out there. So some say nudging is possible because people are irrational or less than rational. Nudging is legitimate because people are irrational. Nudging makes people less rational, or it bypasses people's rationality, or it perverts people's rational decision-making capacities. And some would even claim that it increases people's rationality. It restores people's rationality. They are, imagine lying in bed is not your most rational time of the day, but in a sense, clocky helps you to do what is the rational thing to do, namely get up and go to work. You have reasons, assuming you have reasons to get up and go to work. That's an assumption. Right? So it pulls you out of your irrationality and steers you towards the rational. These are relevant to what I'm most interested in, is the debate on the ethics of nudging. Why? The critics will say nudging is detrimental to people's rationality. It is disrespectful, it treats us as, by tapping into these irrational mechanisms, it doesn't respect us, it treats us as puppets on a string, which it can pull, and then we behave in a predictable way. Or it treats us as children, luring us into specific kinds of behavior. It does not respect our rational decision-making capacities. According to Jeremy Waldron, this is an affront to human dignity, even in the sense of self-respect, an individual's awareness of her own worth as a chooser. The government should definitely treat us as, maybe as or as if we were rational. Proponents would say, so the nudge enthusiast would say, that's a completely wrong view of the human mind. People are not rational, so assuming they will be or should be, or that government should treat them as if they were, is the wrong approach. You should just have realistic expectations about people's rational capacities. Rawls called this a realistic utopia. You can think about all kinds of policies. That's a utopian aspect, but it should be realistic. It should work for people like you and me. This means acknowledging the widespread influence of irrational heuristics and psychological mechanisms which can cause people to act irrationally. We should just take this into account. So what is rationality exactly? That's a huge topic, which I will just kind of go through relatively quickly. There's different conceptions of rationality, I would say. You can have economic conception, reason-based conception, or effectiveness-based conception. I'll go into this later on. The most important distinction that I'll make in all these conceptions of rationality is between a process and an outcome-oriented version of these, or a variety of these. So an outcome-oriented approach to rationality, or conception of rationality, stresses, just asks whether the behavior is in line with what is considered to be rational. You have a reason-based approach, you have specific kind of reasons, you have a reason to get up and go to work. Whatever leads to that outcome is rational in that respect. It's outcome rational or outcome-oriented rational. They don't really care about the process, they don't really care about the causal mechanisms underlying the behavior, as long as the behavior is in line with whatever is deemed rational, that's outcome rationality. Process rationality is more demanding, it focuses on the processes. It adds another element. There should not only be reasons for your actions, the reason should actually be motivating your actions. So the process that brings behavior about should be rational as well, which again can be interpreted in different ways. Now, this is just to flag up the structure of the discussion. If you make these kind of distinctions and just allow for different kinds of claims about the impact of nudging on rationality, so you could say nudging can have a positive effect on rationality, it can have a neutral effect on rationality, it can have a negative effect on rationality. If you distinguish between process and outcome versions, you get something like this. So some nudges may increase process rationality and outcome rationality, that's over here. Some may decrease both, and then you have this matrix popping up. I'll go through this as we go along, and I'll put this on the board later on to return to it so you can see what the examples are. To get a better grip of the process versus outcome oriented variance, think of economic rationality. Economic rationality is kind of like Olympian rationality, the rationality of econs. Actions are rational if and only if they are properly motivated by consistent, fully informed, perfectly rational beliefs on the one hand, preferences on the other hand, preferences which should be well behaved, which means they should be consistent, transitive, complete, continuous. I won't go into all these kinds of rationality assumptions. But the idea is that imagine a being, we call him an econ, homo economicus, which fulfills all these criteria and acts accordingly. That's a rational, economically rational being. You can also have an outcome-oriented variant of this, that is as-if economic rationality. You can say, okay, people like you and me probably will not think and prefer the same exact way as the econs do, but they can be called rational if they do the same things they would do if they were econs. Right? They behave as if they were econs, and that's enough to call them rational. So actions are rational if they outwardly resemble the actions of econs. What matters is not whether you actually have perfectly rational beliefs, whether you actually have the computational power of an econ, for example, but as long as you behave as if you have them, that's fine. Right? So why start out with the economic conception? Because that's where the whole nudge literature actually started. It's based on behavioral economics, which is a research, which whole research agenda is based on the fact that people apparently do not behave as econs do. People often violate these rationality axioms. People are humans, not econs. They have limited brain power, they have limited willpower, they have these biases and heuristics which cause these violations of, these anomalies, often called these violations of the rationality axioms. Now what is interesting is that the proponents of nudging often hold on to economic rationality as something of an ideal. So we should use nudging to promote outcome economic rationality. We should steer people in the direction that they would do if they were econs. So nudging should be aimed at what people would prefer if they had complete information, unlimited cognitive abilities, and so on. That's keeping homo economicus not as a descriptive model, but as something of an ideal. And then mortals, we can blame mortals for not living up to this ideal, but we can also use nudging techniques to steer them in that direction. So think of what a GPS does. This is a nudge that promotes economic rationality in the outcome-oriented sense. It doesn't turn you into an econ. It doesn't give you the computational power of the GPS itself, but it steers you predictably in the direction that you would go if you had unlimited brain power, if you had all the information about traffic jams, streets, and so on.
I find that sort of strange in a way, because I mean, what did sailors? I mean, it's in John Stuart Mill, you know, what sailors used on the, to navigate, was astronomium or something. What do you call these things? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
One of these instruments. I mean, so if I use one of these instruments, am I thereby not being process-rational? I mean, it seems to be that I am. I mean, because I say, well, very trustworthy people have made this thing, and they've written out how to do this and that, and here I go, I use it, and I get to the port, right? And this is just a slightly more complicated machine.
Sure. Well, I think the idea is that you outsource specific processes, right? I mean, rather than going through the whole mathematical thing you have to do in order to, or I don't know, gathering all the necessary information, interpreting it, inferring the right conclusion from the information, and so on, you just outsource this. You just say, the GPS is going to do this in my place. And I'm just going to listen to whatever the voice tells me to do, which it does it in a really good way, in a really salient way, in a really, at the right time. I don't have to care about all the information. I just can be lazy and do whatever the voice tells me.
There's a difference then between the example we gave and the GPS example. Because sailors using the magnetic stone to actually navigate, right? Mm-hmm. That's actually, you don't have the ability to tap into magnetic fields without the appropriate kind of instrument, right? We just don't have that capacity. So that's using a device to give you access to some information about the external world that you couldn't get in the absence of it. The GPS is basically just acting as an extended mind that you're outsourcing to, and because you could, in principle, memorize everything that the GPS has, right? So you don't, strictly speaking, need the GPS, but you do need the lodestone because you can't actually tap into magnetic fields, right? So there is a difference between those two things.
Yeah.
That's if you would just think about the compass, right?
Yeah.
I had my astrologium set.
Like the sextant?
Yeah, sextant, that's the word I mean.
Okay.
So I guess the thing is, why it's not process rational is because it's not, the GPS is not giving you all the information, trying to convince you what to do. It's just, it does all the rational thing is all going on the GPS, so to speak, and you just set it up and go along.
So a map also outsources, right? So you
Sure.
don't do all the sort of figuring out where the roads go yourself, but you just take this as
Well, yeah.
an accurate representation.
Again, most of the cases there are some rational processes going on and some less rational processes going on, right? If you have a look at the map, you still have to interpret, where is Holborn or how it should have walked down. So it's a bit more, I would say it's a bit more tapping into your process rationality, whereas this, you can think of other kinds of examples which make this even, which make process rationality even more superfluous, right? If you,
The car
or
actually.
if you could build a self-driving car.
So I think there's a distinction between the examples that are given in this one. It seems to be you've given this thing a goal and it's worked out the way of delivering that goal. Whereas with the kind of maps and the other things, there isn't any process occurring in a sense.
Yeah.
So whereas with the GPS, it's really given you a process, a goal, and it tells you how to deliver that goal.
Yeah.
It's not really clear that happens with the map, I'd say. Or I was initially sympathetic to that view, but then I think that there does seem to be a distinction here with respect to process.
I agree.
So I don't think I'm persuaded completely about de Guerenza's claim that, at least in Nudge in the Sunstein-Taylor version, that requires buying into the economist's full version.
Yeah.
All they require is that however agents reach their views and preferences, that there's some sort of that they will approve of it ex post or something like that.
Yeah.
But it doesn't require that approval comes from a complete reflexive, continuous transitive preference.
Yeah, I agree. And this will pop up later on as well.
I'm puzzled about one other aspect of the GPS example, because most of the objections to nudges are objections to using nudges as policies where you impose them on individuals. Whereas the GPS is something that I can turn on myself and turn off myself. Just like this clocky type thing, and I can just say, well, I want to constrain my autonomy in that manner. And that seems much less objectionable than if it's imposed to us. So let's say if there's another example in the discussion of paternalism, that you have a person who knows that they have really terrible self-control and they know that they will eat all this unhealthy stuff, so they ask their partner, can you just hide all this unhealthy stuff from me? And of course that's in some way paternalistic, but we won't really object to that because the person has given their consent to be treated in this manner.
Sure.
Whereas in all the policy cases, that's precisely what's...
Okay, so that's the question, who is doing the nudging? So who is the nudger? Sometimes there's trust issues popping up there as well. You trust your girlfriend to help you figure out a specific thing that you would like to do. So some people like the fact that their mom is actually getting them out of bed, but they would hate a police officer standing next to their bed saying you have to get up, you have to go to work. That's one thing. Yeah, but the whole idea is that, so if you're talking about choice architecture predictably influencing behavior, it can be self-imposed. We set up our own choice architectures all the time. If you clean up your room, you're setting up the choice architecture for the next morning, so to speak, or the way in which you design your office space, for example, is setting up your own choice architecture, which has predictable behavior from it. So, but it does matter with respect to questions concerning legitimacy or desirability. You could also think of government examples of this, right? If government sets up a website which allows you to really easily calculate, for example, your pension or something like that, or different pension schemes, and provides you the information really saliently, or provides the conclusion of the whole thing really saliently, that might be an example of a nudge that is somewhat similar to a GPS. So again, the idea is not to improve people's process rationality. In this sense, it's not trying to turn you into econs. It takes the bounds and limits of rationality as a given and tries to improve your decisions in an as-if way, in an outcome-oriented way. So it enables people to do what they would do if they were econs. You can do the same kind of things for other conceptions of rationality. You can say rationality is all about reasons. Actions are rational if they are properly motivated by the agent's reasons. That's a view that, for example, Lucas defended. Conversely, actions are irrational if there are mental mechanisms causing the behavior that are not proper reasons for that behavior. Or you can again go for an outcome-oriented view where you say, I don't really care about the process that is going on. All I care about is whether actions outwardly conform to what the agent would do if she were motivated by her reasons. Actions are then irrational if they do not outwardly conform to what the agent would do if she were not motivated by her reasons.
That's sort of like the as-if rationality.
Yeah. Every outcome version is an as-if rationality. Here the only thing that changes is as if you were an econ.
Oh, sorry, it's there. I didn't see it.
There's again a bunch of different views on, okay, so are there additional criteria for these reasons? Should these reasons be consistent? Should they refer to your real reasons or your authentic reasons or your genuine reasons? Should they refer to something like meta-preferences, for example, rather than first-order preferences? Should they be well-informed, your beliefs? Does it matter how the beliefs and preferences come about or not? Different views all over the place. They go to really demanding views where there is some kind of idealized agent, and you are rational if you act as if you were an idealized agent. I will put these differences aside, even though they do matter from a rationality perspective in the sense that they're going to impact which kind of elements you think are relevant to a decision or not, which kind of elements are relevant from a rationality perspective. I don't want to go into this in particular too long. So again, nudging is based on findings that irrational psychological mechanisms often cause agents to act in ways contrary to our reasons, however you want to conceive of them. They don't tap into our reasons. They don't highlight our reasons. They don't remind us of our reasons. They simply steer into these irrational mechanisms in order to make us end up where we do want to end up, to use a spatial metaphor. This is what is often called means paternalism. So if you can find out what people's real goals are, what people reflectively judge best, or what they have reasons to do, then we know what the goal is. Government is not intervening with respect to the goal here. They're only means paternalists saying we're going to improve your decisions, which means helping you to get to where you want to get. Right? It's just correcting the mistakes people predictably make with respect to means. If we can assume that people want to lead healthy lives, and let's assume that all of us do, we take that goal as a given, and we're going to focus on the decisions people make with respect to the means. Oh, you're taking donuts every single day? That's not a good idea. Let's try and correct that problem with respect to the means.
So, I'm just wondering if you could say something about the concept of the person that you have, which allows us to actually identify what is a real goal for the person as opposed to, say, their actual preferences. I know that one way you might do that is to say, look, what I mean by a real goal is they're all things considered preference, that at the moment of kind of cool rationality, they actually say, this is what my actual goal is that I will endorse.
Yeah.
But what I want to know is why is it that simply because a person behaves that way at one moment in time, that we somehow take that as an all things considered truthful representation of their state, as opposed to say a later goal? Because we just have two different time indices on an individual. I want to know why the fact that someone says, this is my all things considered preference earlier, should actually, as a matter of fact, truly be seen as overwriting a later thing. I mean, I know that there is a difference there, but why is that the difference that matters?
Okay, so Sunchin and Taylor would use which is on the slides, on the next kind of slides, the dual process version, right? You have an automatic system and a reflective system. To the extent that you would say your real self lies in the reflective system, the argument there would be we identify with the reflective system. When we are led by our automatic, less rational psychological mechanisms, we sometimes feel we're being tricked by our own minds in a sense. So sometimes, you can, for example, think of acrasia, weakness of the will. You really want to be fit and go out to jog twice a week, but you know how it works, you don't have to end up doing it. You just say, why is the moment where you decide to stay in, be lazy, have a bag of chips, why is that less?
But this seems to be so if you buy the dual system account as a description of what's going on in the head, I mean, this seems to be a privileging of a rational conception of the self as the only thing which is really true and distinctive in the real aspect of a human being, downplaying the system one. I mean, think about it. I mean, so much of what we do is really driven by the automatic system. I mean, when you recognize friends, right? When you respond to music, right? That's not something which is the rational, calculated response, right? You just recognize someone as, oh, that's Jane or Joe. But, there still needs to be an argument for why you say, look, of all of the various components that go into making up a person, why is it the rational aspect which really trumps everything?
I wouldn't say it trumps everything.
But why is that the thing that really matters as opposed to all the other stuff?
I wouldn't even say that. I mean, you can do the same kind of analysis with respect to, for example, autonomy. And then you need a specific account of what autonomy is. You need a specific account of for example, liberty, if you want to analyze these things with respect to liberty. If you want to make claims about the relationship between nudging and rationality, my approach would just be whatever approach you... So, whatever conception of rationality you have, there's different ways in which different nudges influence that. I'm not claiming here that rationality is all that matters, or that there's one version of rationality which is the most important one, or the one that captures all value, or something like that. But to the extent that people self-identify as rational human beings, to the extent that people care about being rational in a specific way, either being in touch with their reasons or doing the things they reflectively judge best, to the extent that people actually think that's a valuable thing to do, to that extent this matters. And I agree, I mean, a lot of the automatic processes that are going on are relatively unproblematic or are in line with what people have reason to do. But sometimes they lead us astray, sometimes they make us do things which we later regret, for example. Those are the times where the irrational mechanisms are causing behavior that are no longer aligned with our reflective system or our reasons. And those are the things that the nudgers are actually looking for. These are what Sunshine calls the occasions for paternalism. Here, the agent himself would say something is going wrong, because there is a gap between what they find themselves doing almost automatically and what they really, really want to do, or what they've reason to do.
Just like a practical question, how do the nudgers go about finding out about people's real goals?
I'll come back to that later on.
Okay.
It's a huge issue. It's an epistemic problem.
Yeah, but also a problem of paternalism, because if you just assume that this is what people want, even if you get it right, that's still paternalist, right? Or if you make inferences from generalizations about two individual goals, it still seems paternalist.
It depends on, again, how you define paternalism. So the last, for example, Julian Legrand and Bill New defined paternalism as some kind of substitution of judgments, and this is exactly what is going on here. So a judgment with respect to the means, not the goals. Maybe if you tell me what your goal is, and if I can see you doing something which is not in line with your goal, then I can infer you made a bad judgment with respect to the means, and I'm going to intervene. You could then say, but then just shows your goals have changed. When you lay in bed, you're lazy, your only goal is to turn around and have an extra hour of sleep. Sure. But then I would say, given the fact that most people self-identify as being a good and loyal worker, they will want to get up, they have reason to get up, and they don't want their less rational mechanisms trumping their agency.
So this kind of on Jason's point, I feel like it doesn't have to be cashed out either in terms of rationality or time indices. I feel like what's really doing the work is this distinction between local and global preferences, right? So we have preferences to stay in bed, but we also have preferences, which are preferences about what we do now, but also preferences about how we want our entire life to go. And maybe what matters is, maybe what we're really getting at is that what we think to be the kind of preferences that we fulfill are preferences that people have about how their life goes rather than preferences about how...
Sure. That's more in the direction of meta preferences, for example, or second order preferences, or global preferences, or looking like what is your overall preference structure, is that a phrase that Luc uses. But then again, some instances might be way off, right? I mean, sometimes you find yourself doing things which are not in line with your reflective judgment, meta preferences, global preferences at all.
So I just wanted to add something that Jason was saying, because you kept coming back to this response that, well, people self-identify with this kind of more rational self, or whatever word you want to use. The problem seems to be is that the bit that you ask which do you identify with is the bit that is the reflective rational bit. So you say, which bit do you identify with? Well, I identify with the bit that I have. You can't ask the id, if you like, whatever, what bit, who do you identify with? Because it's got no voice. So it seems like a sort of...
Well, it has a voice, it's a rather quick one actually, but...
it goes off and, hunts for food or something.
The way I take a lot of the empirical stuff on this, also the neuroeconomics thing, moral psychology literature on this, is that so often the automatic processes are quick. Often they're producing good results. And what often happens is that those are the real drivers for our behavior, and then the reflective system comes later and just says, oh, apparently I chose this, now I'm going to find ways of rationalizing what actually happened. Right? There again, I would say there are some instances where your automatic processes lead you to a specific place where later on you say, this is not where I wanted to end up, and where I wanted to end up. Right? So, yeah.
So it's a question.
You never overslept because you ignored your alarm clock and then felt bad about it?
I think Jason's question is the thing of really who should be in the driving seat, and why are we deciding that it's the reflective one that should be in the driving seat there? If the id is, or this other one, that's anyway in the driving seat, it's it's sort of a kind of imperialist kind of oppressive thing where you're trying to just tame this guy that's in the driving seat.
Sorry?
One's meta preferences change depending on how much the one system versus the other system is in control. Like when one is sober versus when one is somewhat intoxicated, and some meta preferences are different. And how do you choose which of the states to...
Those are all good questions. I think, I will come back to this later on as well. Those have to do with, so if we want to be means paternalist, for example, or promote outcome rationality, how do we find out which of the preference to identify as being the ones that specify the direction where people want to end up? I think we can often assume where people want to end up, and they have reasons of, and they have ways of telling us as well. But I mean, a lot of the more kind of innocent examples of nudges have to do with, for example, the way in which stoves are designed, the buttons on stoves are designed. You can do this really badly in a way that if you turn on one button, a stove lights up which you didn't want to, or the handles on a door also automatically signal. It's also, you see where. So this example, for example, the last one, if you have a handle that automatically signals you need to pull. If you have like a flat button or something like that, or a plate, that signals pushing. Here again, I would say this is you can safely assume case. You can safely assume what people want to do when they're standing in front of a door. There's no big issue about what is my meta preferences. Is this, do I self-identify with my reflexive? No, people who are standing in front of a door just want to get out or get in, and just let's nudge them in a way that they predictably do what they have reason to do. The urinal, the fly in the urinal is a famous case as well. We can assume that most people who are standing in front of a urinal do not want to spill too much. The fly helps them to do this. Yeah, but what if people really reflectively judge it best to spill all over the place? They're still free to do so, but we can safely assume that most people want to do this. Right? So most of the nudges steer clear of the very deep. What is the relevant? Is it a reflective judgment? Is it a reflective system? Is it a global preference? Is it a meta preference? Which meta preferences is it? So even in local preferences, we have these nudges that can help you out.
It's a bit. I'm sort of reminded of this. Gaines on his deathbed apparently said, "I wish I drank more champagne." Yeah, but it's a bit like that, right? So if you look at your life and you say, what should I do reflectively, right? But then of course there can be this point where you say, what a stupid thing to always follow that reflective advice, right?
Sure.
And so if the nudgers are helping us to do the reflective thing, not for sure that's really a good thing. I mean, you wouldn't get Gaines to drink more champagne.
Yeah, that's also related to the joke that healthy living doesn't actually make you live longer; it just feels like it.
Okay, the nudge proponents would always say, I mean, a nudge should be easy to avoid or easily resistible in a sense. So if you put apples at eye level, for example, it is not. I mean, if you really think. What do you call this? Live hard, die young, or something like that. I mean, go for the donuts every single day, right? I mean, they're still on the shelves.
I mean, it's easy to say that they're going to be easy to avoid, but when you're being constantly bombarded with them from everywhere, this poor kind of automatic faculty is breaking down under the weight of this constant bombardment here. And I was thinking, the point that Mike said really struck me, because there might well be a good reason why that guy is in the driving seat of the car I'm in, because I'm unreliable. I change my mind all the time. This guy, through evolution, has evolved look, I can't trust you to make these decisions. Okay. I'm going to drive this car.
Okay, so there the argument would be the evolutionary story behind the heuristics that we find ourselves having. We've now moved in a society where a lot of these evolutionary evolved forces are not serving us well anymore. For example, craving for sugar, that made a lot of sense in a society where you sometimes needed to, when you had an abundant supply of food, you should binge eat and get all the sugar and fat that you needed. Whereas now, when food is abundant, this craving that is still there isn't serving us well anymore, given obesity numbers, for example. So you would say it seems like a reliable driver. Some would say, in some cases, the driver is wrecking the car with the reflective system in it as well, because the driver is no longer well adapted to the environment that he's now in. And again, the environment is often being rigged in ways that are going against our reflective judgments without going into long discussion. Okay. This is the same thing. So we've already talked about the automatic system and the reflective system, Homer Simpson and Spock, and I'm completely in favor of drinking champagne and being Homer from time to time, by the way. So reflective judgment, but you have the same story with respect to process-oriented and outcome-oriented. The nudges do not want to turn us into Spock. They want to help us do what we would do if we were Spock. Right? This is how Konrad Hartmann formalizes it. So in the initial state, there's something like a tension. The automatic system prefers the donuts. The reflective system prefers the apple. If we nudge and change the choice architecture, it is meant to align the reflective system with the automatic system. So that the automatic system no longer prefers the donuts because of the sugar, or because reflective is at eye level, but now prefers the apple, which we reflectively endorse. And then the behavior predictably is P, which is, again, simplistic in a sense because it only increases the probability of people picking P, but it might be really good that a lot of people end up picking the donut because that simply shows that that they have a strong preference for going against the nudge.
Just really quick questions. I mean, again, the model that's still in the background is that you've got the rational reflective stuff inside, which gets screwed up whenever the emotional automatic stuff gets in the picture. But then, how do you respond to the Damasio stuff from Descartes' era that says if you look at people who actually have lesion damage to the brain, such that the automatic, affective, emotive aspect is damaged, that actually impairs their ability to act as rational reflective agents. So these aren't really in contrast or in conflict. I mean, they're deeply interconnected in ways that we don't understand, and seeing them as this separable, conflicting system is a misrepresentation.
Yeah, sure, I agree. I mean, it's overly simplistic, it's a misrepresentation, and often, if you can, so I always try to talk about less rational and more rational processes, or less conscious and more conscious, or less deliberate and more deliberate ones. And often the automatic unconscious ones are, I mean, indispensable to get around to make good quality decisions. Again, the only cases where nudges are helpful are those cases where the two come apart. And that might be a limited amount of cases for sure.
Isn't that last quote you had there from Kahneman, isn't that exactly Jason's point just in the previous slide?
This one?
System 2 is System 2 is itself an evolved system, just like all of the other. So evolution selects for outcomes, not processes. And the fact that we have one kind of processional thinking is merely because it was useful to achieve the rational outcome. And now what we're doing is with nudging is still outcome oriented, but we realise that the environment is no longer what evolution selected for. So now we're intervening.
Now we're intervening
to nudge, so such that we get the outcomes.
Again, I would say the general idea is that we should trust the reflectives that in our contemporary societies, in a number of limited cases, we trust our reflective system better than our automatic system. If we look, for example, at obesity numbers, right? It's a limited claim. It doesn't imply that rationality is all that matters, or that the reflective system is always right, or that the reflective system is not an evolved system or something like that. But just that we trust the reflective system in these limited cases a bit better than automatic systems.
So I think it's just problematic because there are cases when you could obviously fail by doing too much reflection.
I agree there. I'll come back to this as well.
Case.
How are you doing on time? Because you've got to somehow shut up your audience.
Right. I'll come back to this. I'll skim
So
through.
we'd like to wrap up around 7. Sure. We take the questions, as the... So if you have 5 more slides, we're perfectly fine. But if you have 20 more slides, then...
We have 13, but I'll skim through some of them because they have been mentioned.
Okay.
Yeah. So, first of all, I would say nudges can actually promote not only outcome rationality but process rationality as well. Well, the nudges are, as I've mentioned before, presenting information in a salient way. This example is one where you put this in the shower and it presents the information about your usage of water, but it does so in a really salient way. The longer you shower, the smaller the ice becomes on which the polar bear is standing. So it's stepping into your emotions in a sense, but also merely the fact that you get feedback straight away from the amount of liters of water that you're using is information on the one hand, but it's given in a salient way, so it's you can call it a nudge. But it's like a reminder, right? I mean, if you are a green kind of guy, this way of setting up your shower choice architecture is a way of boosting both your outcome rationality. You want to shower shorter, less long, and you do so on the basis of information. These examples we've mentioned, these are nudging promoting outcome rationality. With respect to the GPS and the spatial metaphor, so Sunstein, for example, calls this increasing navigability. Facilitating choices, increasing the probability of people ending up where they want to end up. And we often welcome strategies that help us in that respect. These are the self-imposed pre-commitment strategies that have been mentioned before. I sometimes suffer from procrastination. I guess we all do. There are some self-imposed nudges available, like apps that remind you now and then of the amount of procrastination that is going on in the day when you're at the office. You can go to the website stick.com, which allows you, for example, to sign a contract where you specify a number of goals. If you don't reach the goals, you can, for example, specify that an amount of money goes to a cause that is completely against your own preferences. I think one is the George W. Bush library or something like that. So, if you're a Democrat and you don't want money going there, you can pre-commit in this way. It's not a nudge because there's money involved.
Economic cost, right?
Yeah. This is not a nudge either. This is the hard way. You can just kind of like block access to websites or have an app block access to websites if you suffer from procrastination. I agree that I also want to claim that sometimes nudges can decrease process rationality. So if you're in a reflective mode, sometimes nudges can make you less reflective. So imagine going shopping, having made a shopping list, and then there's smart choice architecture that steers you into picking kind of items that you don't really need, but you just kind of get lured into that. That's definitely decreasing process rationality. It's probably also decreasing your outcome rationality because you didn't want to buy those reasons or you don't have good reasons to buy them. And here's the epistemic problem. How can nudgers ever find out what my reflective judgments are, what my global preferences are, what my reasons are? Other critics would say it's even worse, even if they get it right, even if there is outcome rationality, the way in which they steer us is manipulative. That's wrong in itself. So even if the cafeteria steers me in a direction that I endorse, the fact that there is this steering going on is manipulative, and again, this is disrespectful. The replies that the nudge proponents have are threefold, I guess. Two have to do with outcome rationality. So a proper nudge should be easily resistible. If it isn't, it shouldn't be called a nudge. It should be called a shove, or it's closer to coercion or something like that. If there is no way of people finding out what is going on, resisting the influence, sidestepping it, avoiding it altogether, then it's not a proper nudge. And in some cases, you can have this kind of issue arising. So for example, defaults work really well. If you have a default rule where you're registered as an organ donor, and there's an opt-out system, 80-85% of the people are registered as organ donors. They're just too lazy to opt out. If you do it the other way around, if you have an opt-in system, only 10 or 15% of the people will be opting in. Here the question is indeed, I mean, what does this show? Does this show that the influence is not easily resistible? Or does it show that people do not actually have strong preferences about what happens after they die? There's different ways of looking at this. There's different ways of assessing these kinds of examples. My idea would be if it's really hard to resist, it isn't a proper nudge. It should be called a shove or something else. And in my mind, if you have strong preferences, if you really have a shopping list and you go to the supermarket, you will not be lured into buying things, especially if you go to the same supermarket several times. You can see through the tricks and you can avoid nudges or learn to avoid. Okay? Most people who are most susceptible to nudges are the ones who do not really care, who are kind of indifferent, or who have only like global preferences. So if I walk in to the restaurant on the 5th floor, my global preference is eat the vegetarian option. That's basically it, and I'll go with whatever is a vegetarian option. Sometimes I just go into a shop and I just take whatever's at the counter just to get my sugar rush, whether it's Snickers or Mars or an apple, I don't really mind. I just go along with whatever the choice architecture tells me. Again, you could say this is you're being manipulated, right? I would say, no, I'm just going along with the choice architecture the way it is set up. And it's not going against my preference or going against my preference because I apparently don't have fixed, strong preferences on the issue. Safely assume argument, we can safely assume what people want. We're going to discuss this. The inevitability argument is another one. So often these heuristics are in place and you can't avoid their force. Options will be framed one way or the other. A supermarket or a cafeteria has to set up a choice architecture one way or the other. So claiming that nudges decrease process rationality is kind of weird because the heuristics in the choice architecture is there. If you change the choice architecture, you're not decreasing process rationality. You're not making people less rational. Right? Because comparison, the reference point is whether people were rational, more rational before, or with another kind of choice architecture. There's some stuff on what kind of rationality matters. In my view, the economic conception is not that interesting. The ones with reasons are. But we've been through this as well. In my view, I like performing behavior that is in line with what I consider to be good reasons. I might be in a minority, apparently, but in general, I guess most people, in some occasions, think it is a bad thing if they perform behaviors which is not in line with their reasons. Now, the other claim I would make is that outcome rationality is more important than process rationality. In a lot of cases, I can see the value, the added value of not only getting it right, outcome rationality, but getting it right for the right reasons, having the reasons in place and actually motivating the decision. So here the example is rearranging the food in your fridge, which is an example by Luc. So imagine consider yourself having reasons to eat less sugary things or fatty things. And what you do is, you still keep the bottle of Coke in your fridge, but you're going to put it all the way down. You're going to put the fruits on top, for example. So you rearrange your own fridge. After you do that, you open the fridge and you kind of automatically take whatever's there. Your action is not being caused by the relevant reason. Right? It's being caused by your kind of automatic behavior of opening a fridge and grabbing whatever's there. Right? But it is in line with your reasons. So you could say, yeah, outcome rationality, this is being respected, but your process rationality is not there. To me, that's not really relevant. I don't really care about what exactly is going on in this case. I don't really care about getting it right for the right reason. I don't want to be paying attention every time I go into the fridge and doing things for the right reasons. Often I want to have the automatic system in control because it facilitates things. As long as I can trust the automatic system to be steered in the direction that I reflectively endorse, I don't have a specific reason to value process rationality in these kind of cases. Also reflectiveness in standing behind a urinal or standing in front of a door doesn't add much value. I just want the door to be simple to use. The urinal or the stove is fine. It depends on the kinds of situations, of course. Standing in front of a urinal is a different thing than deciding whether or not to become an organ donor, or deciding which pension plan to enroll in, or things like this. So for the more important ones, we might want more reflection. In a sense, this is not true as well, right? Sometimes really important decisions, we just override people's rationality, we override people's agency, we override people's autonomy. Avoiding deaths in traffic, or avoiding deaths through food poisoning. If people have a reflective judgment to become a drag racer, using the streets of London to speed 100 miles an hour, but they're thereby putting themselves and other people in danger, then we're just going to say, screw your outcome rationality. Even if you have good reasons to become a drag racer, we're just going to, this rationality is going to be outweighed clearly by other values, such as saving lives. If nudges can do that, like the lines on the streets, if the drag racer crosses them and automatically brakes, that's fine. If we need more coercive measures, that's fine as well. So some nudges can increase both outcome and process rationality, or lead to different kinds of directions. Maybe I should, just kind of stop here. So if there's any questions, we can maybe come back to this scheme to see where the examples fit in.